Bow of Badon. In the current meta is not the best weapon, but in the right hands it consistently performs well in corrupted dungeons, mist, and is also in demand for Morgana statics. Let's start with the Q abilities. First Q, multi-shot. In a con in front of you, you deal damage and knocking back all enemies' hit. We use this ability in PvP against melee opponents, to make it harder for them to close the distance with you. Second Q, deadly shot. You fire an arrow up to 20 meters, dealing damage to all enemies' hit and decreases their damage resistance. We shoot this skill against opponents it's dangerous to get close to, like curse or fire staff, and you can use it against melee opponents. It's also great for PvE. Third Q, poisoned arrow. You shoot a poisoned arrow at the selected enemy, which dealing periodic damage. The poison stacks on the target up to 3 times. We use this ability in PvP against frost, blows, and other kite builds. First W, Ray of Light. You launch an arrow that deals damage and immobilize opponents within a 3-meter radius. We use this skill in PvE. It can also be applied in PvP, but I don't recommend it for beginners. Second W, Frost Shot. You fire an arrow beneath yourself that explodes in a 4-meter radius, knocking you back, dealing damage to affected enemies and slowing them by 14%. We use this skill in most PvP situations. It provides a lot of mobility and lets you keep your opponents at distance. Third W, Speed Shot. Deals damage to a selected enemy, increases your movement speed and auto-attack speed. The Bow of Badon doesn't deal much damage with auto-attacks, so this ability isn't worth using with Badon. Fourth W, Explosive Arrows. Your next 10 arrows become enchanted, creating an explosion upon impact that deals damage in a 5-meter radius. And this effect also applies to arrows created by spells, but for some reason it doesn't work with Badon's E, so we don't use this skill either. E ability, Raging Storm. You fire an arrow in specified direction that explodes upon hitting a target, turning into a storm cloud that deals periodic damage. Enemies who leave the area continue to take periodic damage for 2 seconds. Each time this skill deals damage, it interrupts the casting of enemy spells. The Bow of Badon's E can be combined with the first W, Ray of Light, but in the mist this is quite risky, since mobility is priority there, especially if you're attacked by 2 or more opponents. First passive, each auto-attack slowing the player by 10% and mobs by 15%. There's no point in slowing mobs, and 10% slowing per auto-attack isn't that significant. Still, it has its place in the PvP, but it's a matter of preference. In PvE you can take the second passive if you're running out of mana. Each auto-attack will restore some mana. For PvP we take the third passive. Each auto-attack reduces the target defense by 2%, stacking up to 4 times. The fourth passive increases your auto-attack speed by 35% every 5th auto-attack. Again, the Bow of Badon doesn't deal much damage with auto-attacks. Build for Mists. The Cowl of Purity, Avalonian Beam. Fires a beam that deals damage and interrupts spell casting. It's a great option for mists. You can deal damage to opponent from a distance without losing your HP. With this cowl it's easier to take down enemies with high item power. The only downside is the high cost of this cowl. The Underhood, Retaliate. Reflects 85% of incoming damage back at the opponent and increases your resistance. It's a good budget option, but in the mist it'll be tough to fight opponents with higher AP than you. The Assassin Jacket's Ambush grants invisibility for 7 seconds. If an opponent uses sprint and charges at you, go invisible. When their sprint ends, come out of invisible, use your sprint and start shooting them down. You can also use it to avoid unwanted fights. The Mistwalker Jacket, Mist Cloud, makes you invulnerable to damage for 5 seconds, slowing you by 20%. You can deactivate it earlier by pressing the skill again. Attacking or using skill will make you vulnerable again. It's the best option for 1 vs 1 fights. You can wait out your opponent's strong skills without losing health. Any Plate Boots, Undead Cape for extra safety or Deadford Cape for additional damage. For consumables, Deadwater Eel Stew or Omelets as cheaper option, and health potions. Built for corrupted dungeons. Cowl of Purity, Hunter Hood, Soldier Helmet. With the Cowl of Purity you can kite your opponent for a long time. With the Hunter Hood you can play aggressively and fights will often end much faster. The Soldier Helmet block grants invulnerability for 2.5 seconds. You can use it to avoid damage from your opponent's strong skills. All these helmets work well for Badon and corrupted dungeons. It's up to each player to choose the playstyle they prefer. Mistwalker Jacket, Assassin Jacket or Cultist Robe. With the Mistwalker Jacket you can wait out your opponent's strong skill. With the Assassin Jacket you can break away if your opponent gets too close. The Cultist Robe, Levitate, restores 7.5% of your maximum health and 5% of your maximum mana, while increasing your resistance for 4.5 seconds. If your opponent has a skill that interrupts spells, use the Cultist Robe after moving away from them. Any Plate Boots, Deadford Cape for additional damage. For consumables, Deadwater Eel Stew or Omelets, and Health Potions. Build for PvE statics. Assassin Hood Meditation speeds up spell recovery for 2.7 seconds. Royal Jacket or Royal Robe. The Royal Jacket Royal Banner creates a 5-meter radius aura around you, increasing attack speed and reducing spell cooldown by 15% for up to 10 allies, and by 30% for yourself. The Royal Robe Magic Rune increases magic damage by 5% and reduces spellcasting time by 10% for up to 6 allies. The effect stacks up to 6 times. For comfortable farming, your team needs both of these jackets, so if one of your allies takes the Royal Jacket, you should pick the Royal Robe, and vice versa. Royal Sandals increases movement speed and damage, but also increases damage taken by 13%. Lemur's Cape to keep you from running out of mana. For consumables, Beef Stew for damage and Calming Potion for safety. Pros and cons. From pros, the Bow of Badon has distant mobility and skill range, allowing you to take down opponents with higher item power. It offers many builds for different playstyles. It's suitable for various types of content. From cons, it's not easy to master and it's so expensive. That's all. Thanks for watching.